Hello, I'm Steffan, and this is Kim. We are doing a podcast about Torchwood because it's a TV show with a lot to say about it. Shall we should tell people who we are.
Yeah.
So I'm a stand-up comedian, although currently I'm not really able to do that job. But I still sort of count myself as one. I think that's how I think of myself. And Kim?
My name is Kim. I make YouTube videos. With all this extra time in the lockdown, I love nothing more than to rewatch Torchwood for the millionth time in my life. So what better way to do that than to bring potentially dozens of people along for the ride? Steph, what is your Torchwood related background? How would you say that you place within the fandom, I guess, of Torchwood?
I started, I think, as a lot of Torchwood viewers did, as a Doctor Who fan. I grew up really into Doctor Who, even though it wasn't really on when I was a very young kid. But my mother got me into it, and I was sort of quite excited. So when it came back, I was super excited, especially because it was so very Welsh. Russell T Davies, who brought it back, grew up on the same street in Swansea that I did.
Oh, wow.
So it's hard to imagine someone closer to my background being in charge of that show. So I was doubly excited for Torchwood, which was a TV show, a spin-off of Doctor Who, but that was going to be even more focused on Wales.
Yeah.
I think Welsh television that I'd experienced before was either Welsh language, and I do love Welsh language TV, but whenever Wales makes stuff that is going out to the rest of the world, it tended to be quite serious, realist drama, and that was a bit of a shame. And I think Doctor Who was where that started to change.
Yeah.
And then we get Torchwood, then we get Gavin and Stacey. We could talk about things like Hinterland, these crime shows. It was the start of Wales being allowed to be part of genre television. And I think that was a really exciting time, and I think Torchwood was really at the heart of it, that kind of mid-2000s era, where Wales was sort of starting to come out and be discovered by the world.
Mm-hmm.
What is your background with this show?
I was a Doctor Who fan as well. There's an age gap between us, so I was a kid when Doctor Who came back, but I didn't actually discover Torchwood as it came out, probably because I was not its target market. It was really important to me because I was already interested in TV production and was really excited that Doctor Who was filmed in Cardiff. But then to see something actually set in Cardiff, where I grew up, that was good. I actually first started watching it on a website called Youku, which is a Chinese kind of version of YouTube at the time. And I don't know how I discovered it, but that was the only place that I, back in the day, could find full episodes. And it would be Chinese characters that I didn't know, and then just the Torchwood episode numbers. So I could work it out by the thumbnails and that. And that's how I watched it. And that's how I fell in love with the show.
That's funny. I think there's a lot to be said about when you watch something in a way that is a bit wrong.
Yeah.
You know, I think I'm so attached to the TV shows I watched as a kid that I watched secretly in my bedroom because I didn't think my parents would approve of me watching it. I think it gave it an added something.
Absolutely.
And I suppose the other side of it is I'm bisexual, and there's a lot of sexuality stuff in this show. Because it has lots of bisexual characters in it, sort of, in a way. I think that's something that drew me in, because so much television doesn't have queer representation. And definitely first time I watched it, I was not out in my sexuality, and I wasn't out for a long, long time after it either. But it's one of those shows that almost sneaks a lot of queer stuff under the radar.
Yeah.
And I think I probably, on some level, want to see myself reflected in the television that I watch.
Mm-hmm. I am also bisexual, and I think it came at a time where I was just sort of coming out to myself, and I think it was one of those shows that was the casual representation that I needed without the focus being about queer stuff.
Yeah.
And I would still say that Torchwood is my favourite show of all time, but whenever I say that to a group, I say it cautiously because I can see it for what it is, and I've never engaged in any kind of fandom type thing. So the relationship I have with it is really personal. Each episode means something to me. I really, in the same way a lot of people have with Doctor Who, I really feel like it brought me up. And a lot of my values and a lot of the ways that I see the world were nurtured by Doctor Who and Torchwood, which is a very uncharacteristically nerdy thing for me to have, I think.
Yeah. And I think I'm coming from the opposite way, where I was heavily involved in fandom leading up to it, but it was specifically Doctor Who fandom. So I was surrounded by people who were looking at this show and going, is this good enough to be a spin-off of our special show? So actually, I've also not really engaged with proper Torchwood fandom either.
Sure.
So I think I was in too deep and you weren't in deep enough going into it.
Yeah.
So I'm excited to see sort of where we diverge. What are the things we latched onto and which were the things that we didn't?
Yeah.
People I knew, we all watched it and we all laughed at the ups and downs of it. My mother loved it, and she went on the Welsh language mastermind, and Torchwood was her specialist subject, and she came second.
Did you say she actually went on it?
She went on it, yeah. And when I say Welsh language mastermind, I mean it's called Mastermind Cymru. It is the proper show.
So that's watchable. That's something that I could go and find.
Yeah, presumably.
Presumably.
It is.
It is quite hard to find Welsh language shows anywhere on the internet, especially if they were before now.
That is true.
Torchwood, I genuinely believe, is an absolutely unique show. There's something about its mix of absolute cynical realism and ordinary people that's perfect. That's very Russell. Like, it's his creation. It makes complete sense.
You're right. It's got this distressingly sort of horrible streak to it that's really grim, the grimness of real life. If Doctor Who is optimism, this is everything else, the horror of it all. But also, it's incredibly stupid and cartoony. The team is presented as very cool. They're in this black car that turns up and does stuff and, takes over from the police. But they're also complete idiots, and they're incredibly unprofessional.
Exactly. Objectively, when you're looking at it for what Torchwood is, they're supposed to be an organisation that keep humanity safe from alien threats and catalogue stuff. And they're so bad at it. Throughout every series, they just continue to fail at that job again and again. But that's not what the story's about. And so there are so many moments throughout Torchwood that are just so Torchwood. And I, on this journey, would like to try and find out, what is the most Torchwood thing that's ever happened? What is the most Torchwood moment in history? I think each episode will offer us a Torchwood moment, but I also think that we can then pit them against each other and have a Torchwood off for the most Torchwood moment. So be on the lookout for that. And feel free to share your opinions as well of what the most ridiculous Torchwood moment is.
Okay, well, shall we start then? Shall we crack on with the episode?
Yeah.
Okay, so the first episode of Torchwood is called Everything Changes. And in this episode, a police officer called Gwen Cooper finds out about the existence of a secret organisation called Torchwood and gets drawn into investigating the mystery. So our first scene, Gwen has been summoned to the scene of a murder. A man has been killed. As she and the other police officers are there, suddenly the scene is taken over when Torchwood's big black car turns up.
Yeah.
And the police are very disgruntled to lose the case.
My favourite thing of this initial thing is right, so secret outside the... Right, I'm going to call it a government organisation, even though it's outside the government, beyond the police. The secret organisation are just so blasé with the fact that they're like, oh, we're called Torchwood. And they've got it engraved on the side of their Jeep. And they're like, oh, what's going on? Oh, special ops are here. Oh, who are they? What's going on? And they're just like, driving in this massive car. That's my favourite thing.
They are the least secretive secret organisation. Everyone knows the name Torchwood.
Yeah, I would say actually that, so the setup of Gwen being on this crime scene, there's the very TV rain, and they have that brief conversation. I would say maybe the Torchwood arriving in their car is a very Torchwood moment. We've already got a contender, and I'm willing to put that forward.
Yeah.
So Torchwood arrive, and they all get out the car to look at this body of a man who's been stabbed. Jack's monologue is a bit weird at the beginning.
Yeah. So this is a scene where Jack tastes the rain and says to his team, it tastes of estrogen, because people take the pill and the chemicals from the pill ends up back in the water cycle. And what he says is, it rains contraception. What a planet, or something like that. And it is such a weird line because
he lives on Earth.
Yeah.
So how many times has it rained and he's been keeping that to himself just to wait to stand in Cardiff town and have a little monologue about it?
So,
doesn't make any sense.
And it's also a really weird decision this early in the episode. I understand for the benefit of Doctor Who fans who already know who he is, oh, this is a bit of a nod to the Jack that we know and love. And it also helps sell the excitement of Earth, because I think a lot of people who like sci-fi might be a bit like, Earth all the time. And to go, no, this is a really weird planet when you think about it, is a bit of fun. Mm-hmm. But you've already got intrigue in this scene, because who's Torchwood? Who are they? What's going on? Is really weird. Yeah. And we're about to see them bring someone back from the dead. So then you also take a moment to go, and also this guy is an alien who was once pregnant, who can taste estrogen.
And then, like, the thing that I think annoys me the most at the point where they're with this guy is that they bring him back to life, right? And then they're like, who killed you? And he's like, oh, I don't know. And then I think Owen says, oh, police said 1 stab wound in the back. And they're like, oh, so he didn't see anything. What do we do? And I'm like, right, guys. So you're telling me that a crime was called in and you in your underground government hub, you got this report and you thought, oh, let's go and test the glove. And you got there completely unprepared, not knowing how he was killed. That's so weird.
It's so bizarre.
Why did they not?
They had a car journey. I mean, Cardiff's not huge, but...
No, it's not. And we know where he was. He was by the Friary.
He was?
Right? They've driven down Lloyd George Avenue, around, and they're at the Friary. It's not long. It's long enough to tell them they were stabbed in the back, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's so weird. But
anyway, the thing that angers me the most about this scene is how unempathetic it was for them to be completely unprepared to go to speak to this body. And then, like, also, they all panic. They're like, oh my God, well, if he doesn't know, what do we ask him? And they're like, oh, well, don't waste the time that he has left. He's about to re-die. And so Jack, he, like... puts his coat behind his hips and he bends down to speak to this guy. But he says, he's like, what did you see when you died? Jack has died hundreds of times. He knows there's nothing after death. But for some reason, despite that, he bends down to this guy who's been stabbed to death, is briefly back for a minute and is going to die again, and asks him what he saw, causing this guy's last living moments on Earth to be fear and existential dread that he has just discovered there is no life after death. That's what Jack chooses to do at that moment. And then he dies again, and that's it. Who could that possibly be for? Jack knows there's nothing after death. And what are you doing? You're just scaring the team for fun? Why does he say that?
It's such a good point. It hadn't occurred to me. Of course, he died. He would know. I already was like, what are you doing? Because I thought, even if you don't know, probably skirt away from, even if you're in the pub with someone and you're both young and neither of you's thinking about death, talking about the possibility of an afterlife can be distressing for people.
Yeah.
There's so much you could ask someone. There's so much you could talk about. There's so much you could do to ease that person's suffering. And I suppose the one job it serves is to show that absolutely none of these people care that this is a human being.
I suppose so, yeah. Which is a really important thing to set up so that we see the value of Gwen's addition to the team.
But it is interesting going, well, what is Jack doing in that case? What's his motive here? Is he double checking? Is he like, oh, maybe other people get one?
Maybe. I've just always thought that was a really, really fucking weird thing to do to someone.
I can make it make sense in the sense that it's a big running theme in this show that being a member of Torchwood makes you lose your humanity.
Yeah, that's true.
And maybe this is a hint that he's lost his humanity.
Yeah.
Something I found strange in this scene, because I don't know if we got an answer for it, is that the rain stops when the glove is used.
Yeah, of course.
And, like, it's heavy rain. Really heavy rain. They're soaked.
TV rain.
It's TV rain. And then, as soon as he dies again, it rains again.
Yeah.
But there's no explanation of, like, why is that a thing the glove does?
No, of course not. Because he's so masked that the estrogen in the rain runs away. That's what it is.
That is a good fix.
Yep.
Masculine John. So while this is happening, so Torchwood has taken control of the scene and they're over the body and they resurrect the man. But the police are sort of kept back.
Yeah.
I still feel like what they're doing is so extraordinary in bringing this man back to life. It still seems a bit irresponsible. There's people nearby. What if the man gets up and runs away? I mean, maybe he can't, I suppose, because he's been stabbed, but it still seems very dodgy. Yeah. However, in this case, Gwen has run up a multi-storey car park so that she can look down on the scene So she's witnessed it all. And at the end, Jack looks up after the man's died a second time and sees Gwen and addresses her, and it's clear that he has known all along that she can see what they're saying.
Yeah.
Is it possible then that Jack was slightly showing off for the benefit of Gwen?
Yeah, that's a good point.
Is he trying to entice her,
Yeah, potentially. So, the next scene we see is Gwen is offering tea to other police officers who are clearly more senior than her. That's the vibe that we get. It's quite a good way of setting up that she's, for want of a better word, she's quite insignificant to the police. And they're investigating the very murder that we've just seen occur.
Yeah, the scene sets up that 3 victims have been stabbed, and it was 2 women and a man, and the 2 women were stabbed in the front, the man was stabbed in the back. We get a little glimpse of Gwen's life. We get to see what her job is like and meet her boyfriend. We see her flat.
Yeah.
We get lots of really obvious and clear bits of character setup, but done really efficiently.
Yeah. When he talks about Dav coming around, they were drinking tea and stuff like that. It's like we introduce Reese and already we know exactly what their relationship is, which I always find quite interesting. There's barely any dialogue. There's no dialogue about their relationship or their needs or their wants. Just from the conversation and what she's keeping from him, we see their dynamic, which is really good.
If you listed everything we learn about Reese in these scenes, we don't know what he's like as a character, really. We don't know what his job is. We don't know how long they've been together. Or we don't know his background or anything. But because the scene is so cozy and so domestic and does that very good, realist, domestic dialogue that Russell does, but also because Kai Owen, I really love him as an actor. I think he's so good in this.
I've only seen him in Torchwood and Pobble-a-Cum.
Ah, yes.
So
I think I've only seen him in Welsh language stuff other than this. And yeah, he's just great. He brings so much to the role that you don't really need character detail. We know this guy. Everyone knows someone like Reese.
It's that weird kind of thing where they're telling us that Gwen could do better.
They are, and yet he does nothing wrong.
No, absolutely not. Yeah.
I think we can jump around a little bit here to focus on Reese, because there's a couple of scenes where she's starting to get drawn into this and becoming obsessive. And our expectation in a show like this is that the boyfriend's going to resent his successful, career-driven girlfriend for ignoring him because she's so busy on this thing that she's getting obsessed with. And he's never like that. He's absolutely fine with her working hard. He's even fine when, as far as he's concerned, she went out after work, didn't tell him, got hammered, came back, decided to do some work anyway. The issue here isn't that she's settled because of any failing on his part. It's that life is bigger than that for her and she's a bit bored by this perfectly nice man. Yeah, that's a good point. We have that brief scene where she is going to get the head injury, breaking up a bar fight, and it's just her and Andy. Oh, Andy. Sergeant Andy Davidson, bless him. I love PC Andy.
Andy and Gwen are walking into the pub, and she's like, "Oh, well, what does special ops mean? Like, what? I don't even know what any of this is about." And he's like, "Oh, I bet it's DNA. It's all DNA these days." Which is one of those things that's really nice to look back on, of the fact that this show is now 14 years old. But also, it was 2005, 2006, whatever it was. DNA research was not like he thinks it's some kind of weird pseudoscience.
Yeah. Andy's not an old enough man to have this opinion in 2006. No. It's like he's been written like a guy in his late 50s who remembers the good old days where you just walked the beat and solved a crime, and now it's all DNA. And I'm like, he's clearly a young man. Yeah,
although I will say, perfectly fits Andy as a character.
Yeah.
Of course he'd say that. Yeah. So we go from the scenes where Gwen is a bit confused and stressed by what she's seen. Scenes of Reese talking while she's ignoring him. Scenes of her on a lunch break with Andy while she's ignoring him. And then she is in the police station and ever subtle Captain Jack Harkness off of Torchwood in his big military coat, looking exactly the same as he did when she just saw him resurrect a man with a metal glove. He just runs through the police station up some stairs, not worrying about anyone seeing him. So Gwen's like, "Oh, shit, there's that guy. I better follow him." So she runs up the stairs, but all she's met with is a porter, that she refers to him as, who's stopping her from going upstairs because it's all closed off by, like, tissue paper, whatever that stuff is. He's like, "Oh, you can't go up there." She's like, "But why?" And he's like, "Oh, chemicals or something." And then she goes on further, at which point we meet Weevil for the first time.
Yeah.
Steph. Right. Why the fuck do they wear boiler suits?
Why are they in boiler suits?
I just need to know, why are they in boiler suits? Like, they all wear the same boiler suit.
Who put them in that?
A tailored, almost, boiler suit. And it's like, I know logically why. It's because they didn't want to blow lots of budget on full-body prosthetics. They just wanted to have a mask. I respect that. But you have to address it, because these creatures live in the sewers.
Yeah.
And later, Jack's like, and they live off, oh, well, you can guess. So they eat human shit, okay?
Yeah.
So why have they got identical uniform boiler suits?
And you're right, like, weevils, as far as I'm concerned, they're rats, right? They're just the alien equivalent of rats. They're massive and they're humanoid, but they're not... Those boiler suits are quite well made.
Right. Also, and the thing that I noticed later in the episode is that the boiler suits are made of like leather or something. Like, they're like a shiny kind of, maybe not leather, maybe that kind of
rubber kind of.
Yeah, they're made of a leather-like material. Was someone keeping weevils as pets on a different planet and then they slipped through the rift? Are they organized? But when they arrived here and they were like, man, they've got some tasty shit living in those sewers. Why don't we just go do that? It just doesn't make any sense.
I've got so many questions about weevils. And it's so funny as well that they become a bit of a signature alien for Torchwood.
Yeah.
When they are shit-eating rats in a boiler suit.
Yeah.
The weevils do set up an important theme, which is that the stuff that falls out in this world is awful. There's no romance or excitement to it. It's just the worst possible stuff. That's what we get to see.
Yeah.
And obviously the implication is that Susie Costello would love to be a Doctor Who companion, getting to see all the good bits of the universe, but unfortunately she's stuck in the spin-off seeing all the shit.
Yeah. I guess it kind of mirrors the feeling that a lot of viewers of Doctor Who have, where you're kind of shown this this mindset of seeing the beauty in everything and seeing how individual people can make a big difference and can be vital to the survival of the universe. But you come away from it, you turn off the show and you're just back on Earth and the sun is going to rise and set every day and everything's just awful. And it kind of takes that tone and writes a show within the universe that mirrors the experience of feeling left out of Doctor Who, because humans don't get the beauty. They don't get to leave things behind. They're just stuck in the same fixed point in time and they just get whatever's thrown at them, because that's the human experience.
I suppose that's the interesting thing about the pub fight. Obviously, part of the point of the pub fight is that Gwen gets injured and goes to hospital. But the other thing it does is it shows how miserable her job is day to day.
Yeah.
And maybe that's why PC Andy says that DNA line. It's not just... It is a character moment, of course, but also it's to show that anyone who's watching it and sees the police uniforms and thinks, oh, cool, I'm watching a police show, it's to remind you that, nah, it's just going into pubs and getting caught up in a big fight. It's not a satisfying job for her. And it's why it works so well as a pilot, is because it poses the question and doesn't answer it here. We have no idea if Torchwood as a job is going to be more satisfying and gratifying than police work. Because if we look at Susie, it doesn't look like it will.
No. Yeah, that's a good point. So, the Weevil kills the porter.
Yeah.
Jack runs Gwen out. One thing that I really liked about that was that instead of, in a lot of sci-fi things, someone will see a monster or a horrible creature and they'll be like, ah! In this one, they're like, oh, that's a sick mask, mate. Where'd you get that? Oh, look at that. Oh, it's so realistic, which is quite nice. After the Weevil kills the porter, Jack runs Gwen out of that corridor. She runs downstairs. We're led to believe, at full pelt, yet when she gets outside, the Torchwood Jeep is driving away. Explain. How could that possibly happen?
Unless one of them is just driving the Jeep away.
Yeah, Yanto's just sitting in the Jeep downstairs. And Jack's like, hey, Yanto, I think a very suspicious police officer called Gwen is about to run past. He's like, I'm on it. And just like shuffles away. Gwen sees the Torchwood Jeep drive away. In a panic, she steals what is basically Andy's patrol car for the day. And she arrives at the bay. She sees them, but she parks on Roald Dahl Place, like just outside the Wales Millennium Centre. And a very angry security guard tells her she can't park there. When she finishes interacting with him, she looks over and they're just gone, which is a bit strange because that implies that they went in the entrance that is the lift, which we never see them do again. So What's going on?
Maybe they know they're being followed.
Maybe. So they use the perception filter.
They do know. Maybe that's why they got a real shift on to get into the Jeep. And they've got a sense. And we see very shortly after this a shot of CCTV of Gwen, implying that someone
she's being watched.
One of the Torchwood team is watching her. So I think it is possible under that circumstance that you would go, let's use our magical invisible lift because that's the quickest way to lose someone.
Yeah, we'll give them the Torchwood benefit of the doubt and we'll accept that. At this point, right, so Andy then, he arrives in the car that she's apparently like nicked off him. And he's like, I have bloody walked. So he's walked all the way from, I guess, a Cardiff Centre police station to Wales Millennium Centre, which is quite a walk in the rain. So fair play to Andy. She's like, oh, but I saw the car and now it's just gone. Which also, yeah, where's the car? She was following the car. And then suddenly she's just seeing them and then suddenly they're gone. And we now know that it's because they went down the lift. But where did the car go? Where do they park the car, Steph? Where does the Torchwood Jeep live? I need to know.
Well, you have to park in the bay sometimes.
I do.
Where
but I
would you
don't
take
think
a
it's
big
parked
Jeep?
on West Bute Street. I don't think so. Not with those prices. We all love a Butte Crescent, right? We love to park on Butte Crescent, but you can't always get it. And I've never seen the Torchwood Jeep there, so I highly doubt it. So Andy gets in the car and he's like, oh, well, like, what the fuck are you doing? And she's like, oh, so clearly, well, like, she must have told him this story about how she saw the car and she's chased it. And he tells her that the number plate does not exist. Now, are we led to believe that the number plate is in fact consistent? And therefore, even if the number plate isn't on the database of like UK car owners, why has no one noticed that it's always hovering around suspicious activity, that it was at the crime scene just the other day, and that it also parked in Gwen's police station's car park without a valid ticket, and suddenly now it doesn't exist? Like, that doesn't make sense. Especially because they openly use the word Torchwood.
Yeah. I mean, half of it makes sense to me, which is that we later see Yanto hacking into some computers to delete any reference to Torchwood on Gwen's computer.
Fine,
So
sure.
presumably he's just doing that across the board. So as soon as you can add a reference to the number plate into a thing, he can just take it off again. What it doesn't explain is how people know what Torchwood is and they are annoyed by them.
Yeah.
And it's the police with all of their resources. They don't like Torchwood. They're a massive pain in their side. Like, Gwen seems to be getting drawn into the intrigue and the mystery, but there must be so many more police officers who are motivated not by mystery and excitement, but by just fury and annoyance. I'm going to find out who these people are.
And like, it could well be that the person who Andy spoke to isn't high up enough to know who Torchwood are. Or it could even be that the person who Andy asked does know, but they need to not let Andy know. Like, it could be the hierarchy thing. Fine. Let's believe that.
You're right, though, because it must be so annoying if you were someone who was in a thriller trying to investigate a group like Torchwood. Because if you're trying to investigate a proper thriller going after a group, you're like, oh, they're so well organised. We're going to find it really hard to crack this. It's actually harder to crack a team that is absolute chaos. There's no rhyme or reason to the things they do.
Maybe that's their game. We keep saying Torchwood are terrible at their job, but it clearly works. So, Gwen goes out again to investigate without telling Reese. She lies to Reese, which again sets up their relationship. She goes into the pizza place. She's like, oh yeah, just looking for these people. Wondering if you could help. Looking for Jack Harkness? And he's like, no, not on the database. Oh, Jay Harkness? No. And then she's like, I don't suppose you do a Torchwood. And he's like, oh, aye, we do them all the time. So Gwen poses as a delivery person. She orders the pizzas herself. She takes them to the hub. Obviously now is like, it's not the main entrance by the lift. So she's going to the Torchwood entrance. I
want to say, the thing I really like about the pizza guy is when it's just some kid who works the pizza job. And his hand's in a cast.
Sure.
And it's just like a nice little thing that it's not important, but it's just kind of, it's a little reminder that this is a human lived-in world.
Yeah, that's a good point, because in a lot of situations you'd imagine that if an extra arrived on set with a cast that they might pick someone else, but there's no reason why a cast wouldn't exist in this world. So yeah, that's a good point. So Gwen walks from the pizza place to deliver the pizza to Yanto's door which is a tourist information place and leads to Yanto's little desk where he has bus schedules and other fake tourist information stuff. And then we see the hub for the first time. And the hub is, of course, it's still shocking to me how incredible that set was. The hub is like this huge set, and the amount of money that went into it was crazy. Like the amount of faith they must have had in Jack Harkness's character and Russell as a writer that this was going to work. Like, it's huge. It's multi-levels. They just made the Torchwood hub. It's incredible.
It is gorgeous. I want to say as well, the other thing that really strikes me about it is the music in this episode is brilliant. And it really hit me when she gets into the hub and the music just becomes so gorgeous. And I think music is really important to all of Russell T Davies's work, and especially his Doctor Who work. But it gives it its own identity, and it's so good. I really like. I don't remember noticing before how good the music is in Torchwood, but it's brilliant.
Yeah, and I guess it's one of those things. It's like it's a show that's silly and fun, but is uniquely scored too.
Yeah. Yeah.
So she gets to the hub. A really nice moment again when Gwen walks into the hub. They pretend they haven't seen her. And at first, we think that they just haven't noticed her and she's walking in and her plan to pretend to be a pizza delivery person is working perfectly. She sees Susie welding something in the distance. She's Jack walking about. Everyone's on their computers. And eventually they burst into laughter when we find out that basically, clearly, they had this plan to pretend to not notice her.
Yeah. But it's a weird thing as well, because so we go, oh, okay, that makes sense. Because, yeah, of course you couldn't just infiltrate a secret organisation by posing as a pizza. That makes so much sense.
Yeah, true.
So we think, all of this is just like a silly plan to lure her in. Of course they don't order pizza in the name of Torchwood. Of course they don't do that. But then it turns out, no, they do. That bit was true. And it's Owen specifically.
Yeah. Owen goes, yeah, sorry, that's me. I'm a twat, or something like that. So, Jack takes Gwen downstairs to meet the very Weevil that committed the murder that she saw earlier. One moment that I've always found really nice is when she's going to go down with Jack to see the Weevil. It's Susie and Tosh who are there and are like, well, go on, go with him. And I just thought that was really nice because the type of representation of women that you get in Torchwood just wasn't something I'd seen in sci-fi or in investigation type police shows before. But at the time, I remembered it just being really nice, like knowing that even if I didn't know Jack as a character already, as a woman watching it, I still felt like Gwen was safe. And she's being led downstairs by this man that she doesn't know. But there's two women who are clearly very intelligent, very much a part of this world, who are just like, go on, go with him. And it was just a really nice kind of like a setup of the type of team that Torchwood was, which I always thought was really nice.
Yeah.
He sits her down in front of the cage and he's like, look, this is a bloody alien, mate. What do you think of that? And she's like, oh, that's a bit spooky. And then that's the scene. They come out, they go on the lift. Jack's like, come on then. And they get on the lift and they're going to go out for a little drink because that's apparently the logical next step. The lift is a hazard, is the note that I have here. The lift is a huge health and safety hazard. And I don't mean, like, sure, they're outside the government beyond the police. Why should they have to conform to health and safety laws? But I just think, what if Gwen was just that little bit extra scared and she just like stepped off it and face planted into the floor?
So my wife Eleanor made exactly the same point. As the lift went up, she was like, why are there no railings? What?
Yeah, like, come on, man.
You're standing on a tiny slab of concrete.
So small. And also, how on earth did they all fit on it when they snuck away from her?
Yeah.
Who knows? I just don't know. None of these questions will be answered. Jack and Gwen, they go up in the lift. They get to the top. They are now on ground level outside WMC. And she's like, why can't people see us? And he's like, it's a perception filter. He does, not in his few words, but watch it yourself, you know? There's that nice line as well where she's like, but there's a great big bloody hole in the ground. Doesn't anyone fall in? And he's like, that is so Welsh. I show you something incredible and you find fault.
And it makes us all feel called out, right? Because we were already thinking about the
Yeah,
rains.
Exactly. So they go to a bar. He's telling her about all this alien stuff. And she's like, but like, this is crazy, like this stuff could be used for bad. And Jack says all alien technology stays on the base, at which point we cut to every single member, well, not every single, 3 members of Torchwood. We've got Tosh, Owen and Susie, all having stolen from Torchwood, this big secret organisation. They've all stolen alien equipment and are using it for their own investigations and self-gain. And I would again nominate that as the most Torchwood moment.
Yeah, that every single member of this team just takes this ludicrously secret and powerful stuff home with them.
There's no check.
Yeah.
They just walk out the door.
Yeah.
No one's checked on the way in. No one's checked on the way out. I used to work in a card shop, and at the end of my shift, I had to, within sight of the CCTV camera, open my bag to my manager or my supervisor to show them that I wasn't stealing any novelty, humorous cards or gifts from the shop. And yet Torchwood can just bloody walk out with, what have we stolen? So Tosh's gadget is a little machine that when you put it on the spine of a book, it gives you very low resolution pictures of each page of that book. So that's what she's got.
And she looks so amazed when she sees all these pages coming up on her computer. She's like, look at
Even though half the pages are cut off. So also, Tosh, it's a book that you own. Just read the book, Tosh. Yeah. You don't need this gadget.
This is quicker, but worse than human technology that exists.
Yeah.
I suppose the thing is, it would be good for a spy.
Yeah.
If you sort of go in, you can steal records. But we are never shown that that's what she wants to do with it. It's like she's just testing it. When we see Susie, she's stolen the glove and she is using it to resurrect a fly. And we know that she's obsessed with this glove. The resurrection is really on her mind. So she's just properly going, no, the work doesn't finish. I'm using this glove. We'll get to Owen in a minute, but he's definitely being very hands-on and practical with what he has stolen.
Mm-hmm.
And then Tosh is just like, ooh, look what this does. I mean...
Like, the way that she's using it makes it seem like she has not used it before. So she's checking what it does.
Yeah. Why not do that in work? Because it is your job.
Yeah, exactly.
You're probably allowed to do that in work. The only reason this is illicit is because you're doing it in your own home. There's nothing else.
It's not like she's like been really cheeky and after work she's nipped down the bookshop, had a quick scan and then gone like, oh, gonna read this book. There's no gain. She's just having a look. Yeah. So why not have a look in work? It's very strange. Owen, the clip that we get from him.
So this is big, right? If we're getting into this,
it's a lot. Yeah, it's a lot.
Owen has stolen a chemical liquid, like a spray, that is in some way magical, presumably alien. And the effect it has is when he sprays it on himself, it makes him irresistible to other humans sexually.
Yes.
Now, I remember this being the biggest thing that people discussed when it first broadcast. Everyone was obsessed with this idea that one of our major members of the cast was indulging in non-consensual sex with multiple people.
Yeah.
Like, I love trying to fix problems in an episode. I love trying to solve them and going, oh, well, maybe if you look at it this way. This is the one thing that I'm like, I can't work out a way to make this okay.
Yeah, the only thing, when I watch it, because I love Torchwood, and my brain is desperately searching for something so that I can look at this and not be horribly uncomfortable. What I like to pretend that is the case is that potentially this thing isn't necessarily something that makes him attractive to other people, but is something that allows people to act on their true desires. So what I like to watch it as is if the reason he looked at that specific woman was because he could sense something in her that was attracted to him, and the only thing holding her back was the societal rules of like her boyfriend or whatever. And clearly that's not true. And when you know Owen, it's not out of the question that he would use this thing and convince himself that it was okay. But yeah, I've had the same discomfort. So when I watch it, I just tell myself that he is just using a substance that allows them to act on their true desires instead of worrying about societal expectations.
So I think my take on that is, I don't think there's such a thing as what's true in a TV show, because a TV show is always a two-way conversation. It's a writer trying to convey what they want to convey, and a viewer trying to understand that communication. So I think there's no inherent truth, it's all fiction, right? Like, this didn't happen. So I think if you can fix it in your head, that's as good, that's fine. That's
Yeah, sure.
Because as far as I'm concerned, authorial intent doesn't matter. That's not, when I watch a TV show, I'm going to have my own relationship to it.
Particularly when you're working in a world of sci-fi. We're already supposed to agree that these weird explanations for things just make sense because that's just the world that we live in. So it's very easy to then take that logic and turn it into something that fits what you want more.
Yeah. I think you can read the woman's performance in this scene as like, I think she is kind of flirting. I think the performer plays it like this kind of, okay, jog on, but you can read it as a bit of a flirtation. Obviously, no woman wants a creep coming up to her in a bar, and we know that it's difficult to get rid of a creep, but we also know that the first thing you do to get rid of a creep is say you've got a boyfriend, even if it's not true.
Yeah.
And she does have a boyfriend. Mm-hmm. So she could mention it immediately. The fact that she doesn't makes me go, maybe she's kind of into this.
Yeah.
The thing that makes it harder is when the guy comes up to him, the guy is so aggressive and so angry and is like, what are you doing with my girlfriend? And Owen is so calm and relaxed because he's so confident this spray will work.
Yeah.
That's what makes it difficult. Because I think even if I was attracted to someone, it would be hard for that person to convince me to kiss them if I was really angry with them.
Yeah, that's a good point.
But on the other hand, I do like your theory. So maybe it's just that Owen is just so confident in himself that he's like, this guy fancies me.
Yeah. So we see all of this while Jack and Gwen are talking in the bar. Jack basically explains pretty much a summary of everything that Torchwood do, and Gwen is very shocked, not only at what she's hearing, but at the fact that she's allowed to hear it. She seems to have the impression that the reason that he's talking to her is because she could be a liaison with the police, and quickly finds out that that's not Jack's intention at all. He doesn't care about the investigation. And Gwen, we see, chef's fucking kiss. Gwen Cooper moment. So early that I'd forgotten about. She says, so your work is more important than mine. And he says, now you're getting it. And she says, well, tough shit, because I've got a responsibility to report this. And I'm like, Gwen. She then threatens to kind of like, to go public, or at least to kind of like, to further the investigation of the murder with the knowledge that she's gained from Torchwood. And he says, well, good luck. Basically, I've slipped something in your drink. And it's Retcon, a Torchwood-built drug that just erases your memory, very conveniently, much like a retcon of a story. Gwen gets angry, runs away, goes home, and she's like, fuck, I've got to remember this. I'm slowly losing my memory, and starts to type a vague summary of what she's learned from Torchwood. It's like, the government organised it, there's aliens and the things at the bay, and it's all spooky. My main issue with this one, Gwen types all of that out with the intention of remembering it, but Torchwood have thought one step ahead, and Yanto is sat in the Torchwood hub, breaks into her laptop, and deletes that file. What if she'd just written it in a diary?
Yeah.
Like,
well,
just
that's the funny thing, isn't
sense.
It's one of those things that stretched credulity at the time, but would make a lot more sense now. Because if what you'd do in a 2020 version of this story is she'd just write it on her phone.
You put it in your phone. Yeah, absolutely.
Whereas, who gets home and fires up the PC, the desktop?
Fires up the PC.
Opens up Microsoft Word. This is an early sign that Gwen is going to fit in right at home in Torchwood because she makes awful decisions and is a disaster.
Absolutely. The one thing that she has also done physically is she has this brochure of Cardiff Bay, and she's written on it, remember. It's just enough to kind of keep in there that it does give her a little clue at the start. But I'm like, Gwen, why wouldn't you write Torchwood?
So she's a police officer who walks the beat. She must be used to making notes quickly and efficiently.
I'm surprised she can't even do shorthand. Yeah. Also, meanwhile, I just have a bullet point that says, why is Jack on the roof? This roof in particular is Alto Lusso, that flat that looks like a propeller.
Yeah.
That's a spooky one. What's he doing up there?
Why is he on someone's block of flats?
What?
It's very tall.
I've been in those flats.
Good
quite
view,
nice.
I suppose, but...
Yeah.
I've got more of an
How
issue
did he
at
get
the
there?
End of the episode where he and Gwen are on...
When they're on WMC?
Yeah. I'm like, that's not even very tall. There's no reason for it.
And it's like, it's so long that you can barely see what...
They're right in the middle of it.
Yeah.
That's a bad rooftop.
Doesn't make any sense.
It's like, in fact, as I say it now, I realise what it is, which is it's wanting to make him Batman. That sort of Batman thing of looking down, surveying the city.
It absolutely is.
But he isn't Batman. He doesn't have a grappling hook, does he?
Maybe. So we see Gwen being stressed and like people are talking at her throughout her life, but she's clearly daydreaming. She's not involved. She's having a stressful time. She has this vague memory of what's happened despite the retcon, and just probably helped by her word remember written on a Cardiff Bay brochure. And at work, the investigative people have drawn their assessment based on the wounds of this murder victim, what the knife would look like. And Gwen realizes that she actually saw that very knife somewhere, and we don't know where yet. So Gwen looks at this drawing of the knife in the police station, and then she is home and she's trying to draw the knife, and her drawing is the shittest drawing I could ever see. Because it's like, if she was drawing it solely from her memory that she vaguely has of this event, fine. But she was just in work. She saw it on the wall, and she gets home and she's like...
So funny.
scratching these weird spikes onto a piece of paper.
She colours in the shaft of it.
She does. She puts more effort into that.
She gets the shaft spot on. The blade.
Yeah.
Absolute nonsense.
Could she not have taken the picture in work? Because we know that room is the room with the photocopier in it. We've seen her using it this very episode. Could she not have just had a quick photocopy and taken it out?
It's just such chaos at this point. Now, I watched this episode with my wife Eleanor, who made such a brilliant point about this knife, which is, it is so weird, that knife, right? Like, it's got a main blade, then it's got two side blades, but off center, like that, so it's not symmetrical. It's a really specific weapon. Like, I have never seen a weapon like it. It's clearly alien.
Yeah.
Now, we know from the end of the episode that what's happened is Susie Costello of Torchwood is guilty of these murders, and her motive is that she needed bodies to resurrect with the glove. And it's like the extreme end of Torchwood losing their humanity. She's so lost in the work that she is killing people just to test this stupid glove. That means all she needed to get out of the killings was they needed to be distressing, brutal deaths. So that's why they had to be murders. Why did it have to be that stupid ornate knife that only Torchwood have access to?
Yeah.
Just use a dirty kitchen knife. Because you've left such an obvious clue leading back to you.
Yeah, it's very Torchwood, is what it is.
If she wasn't so Torchwood about it, she could easily get away with this.
It's bizarre. And also, if Gwen saw it in the hub and has that memory of it, she obviously just left it out on the desk.
Yeah.
She's done a murder and she's just like, oh, don't worry about that. I'm having a steak later. Like, why is it there?
I've got a question anyway about Torchwood's storage of stuff. Because, later on, the end of this episode, they put the glove away. I guess they decide that the glove is too powerful to be... in that weird over-the-top box that they have. Yeah, but it's such a small box. Is that the only ludicrously dangerous piece of tech you have? The knife's allowed to just be out and about.
Yeah, but that's old school dangerous, isn't it?
It is old school dangerous, yeah. It's not power corrupts dangerous. But then they have absolutely tons of space for bodies.
I know. Yeah, and the only person who seems solely responsible for it is Yanto. Yeah. Just you've just found out that every member of the team nicked something to use it for their own personal gain, and you're still leaving just one person in charge of cataloguing and keeping it safe. Yeah. Why doesn't he learn? Yeah. It's really weird.
But for now, so Gwen makes it back to the Torchwood hub and finds Susie, and Susie essentially realises, oh, she's remembered and I'm stuffed. There's no way I can get away with this killing. Let's talk about her motive here. We know that she wants to use the glove and she needs bodies for the glove, and so she's killed people in order to have those bodies.
Yeah. She just seems one of those people who's so interested in it that she dived into it in a way that the others didn't. That's maybe why it swallowed her up so much, because she was too involved. Yeah.
So Susie's speech is that the line is, why do we get all the weevils and bollocks and shit?
Mm-hmm.
And this is a bit, I think this is quite a big Doctor Who thing, and Torchwood has inherited it, where the characters are often vaguely aware that they're in a TV show. They kind of know. So Susie knows that she's in the spin-off about horrible things.
Mm-hmm.
And it drives her mad. She wants to be in Doctor Who. She wants to be seeing the beautiful planets and the wonderful aliens. But sorry, she's stuck in Cardiff seeing what washes down the drain.
Yeah, which is so human as well, because it's like the world should be beautiful and the technology that we could develop should be beautiful. But the way that Torchwood frames people's discoveries of aliens is always really reflective of flaws of humans and Earth and stuff as well. Torchwood really marries up that kind of feeling of being left behind and the shittiness of the realism of Earth, but trying to match that with the fact that what you're looking at that's falling from the stars is objectively incredible. It's just tainted with the same rubbish as Earth.
Yeah. And I guess it connects as well. I've only just thought of this, that there's a thematic link between her speech and PC Andy scoffing at CSI, at DNA and things.
Yeah.
Probably Andy and Gwen became police officers because they fell in love with the romance of the idea of being police. They liked the idea of solving crimes and solving mysteries. And actually the reality is most of it's going into pubs and breaking up fights. And
yeah, exactly.
So yeah, I think you're right. I think what's driving her is, it's not that she's doing this for the greater good even per se. She's just doing it because this is the best way to do her job.
Yeah.
Because she's not like that, the murderer who's like, these people have to die. She's more like, oh, if these people die, it'll help my research. So it's really sociopathic.
Yeah. The little kind of monologue she has about it where she's like, I love this job, I really loved it. She's like, it gets inside you. That I think is kind of, it's a good setup for the journey that Gwen is about to go on.
Yeah. So what's at stake in this show is Gwen's heart and soul. That's the jeopardy. We are going to see this person who cannot bear to see this stuff happen. And then she's going to enter the system, and to what extent is she going to be able to keep hold of her own humanity?
Yeah.
You know, if you watch an episode of CSI, every episode will find some kind of statement to make about the characters. Whereas this show is much more pure drama than that. It's not going to go, oh, we'll think of something every week. No, this show has a statement, and it's this entire show, every episode of it, will be answering the broader question of how do you maintain your humanity in this situation.
Yeah.
Like, it's really stupid, like almost cartoony setup. Mm-hmm. But the way they do character work is actually like, it's Breaking Bad or Mad Men or something.
Yeah, it's really, really strange.
It's such a strange mix. And I can understand why people find it really annoying and why it doesn't work for people. Because on the one hand, you've got this like very, very pure approach to drama. And on the other, you've got Gwen's pregnant this week or whatever the plot.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what we have is a standoff. We have Susie confronting Gwen, and then we see Jack sneak up behind her, essentially.
Yeah, we see Jack sneak up behind her by rising out of the ground on their stupid lift. It was 2006. I think green screens could be better than this. Yeah. It's just horrendous.
Well, however he was lit in the green screen studio is just nothing like the lighting on the...
He just looks like a superimposed figurine just rising out, and it's very funny. So, Jack's ascending, and then Susie's like, this job, it gets inside you, and I've really like thrown myself into it, and that's why the perception filter is not going to work on me. And she turns to Jack, who's just risen out of the lift, and she shoots him in the head, and he dies. And
that's a scene I would love to be able to see through the eyes of someone who had no previous connection to this character. Because, of course, we as Doctor Who fans don't know at this point that there's anything up with this guy. We have no idea. We're about to find out that Jack cannot die, that if you shoot him in the head, he'll just resurrect moments later. Yeah. But we don't have that information yet.
Yeah, that's true.
But of course, you know, most people watching this show know that this is the Jack Harkness show and it's a spin-off built for him.
Yeah.
So of course they're not actually going to kill him off.
Oh my God, I thought he was the main guy. That's a bold move in episode 1.
Yeah. So she's shot Jack. Gwen is really shocked, but Jack resurrects, and that's when she knows it's over.
Where Jack resurrects, and there's the little animation almost. Like, it's not CGI, is it? There's little animation of his bullet wound just slapping its way back into his head, and she's like, "Oh my God!" And so then she looks back at Gwen, she looks back at Jack, she realizes that game over, and she shoots herself in the head. And that, I think the shock and the fear of that is enough to trigger all of Gwen's memory.
So it's a bit strange, actually, I think, when we see Indira Varma and Eve Miles play against each other. I like both of them, but they've got quite a different approach in that Indira Varma's much more heightened in her style of performance. And I think that's something I'm looking forward to, is seeing how Eve Miles is sort of quite domestic, realist acting fits into this sort of heightened world.
Yeah.
Jack confiscates all of the stuff that people have been sneaking out of work.
Yeah, just going to pop this glove in a box. Just the bit where they just like, just pop that in there, lock that up. It just looks so casual. It's not stored in padding like an important artifact. They just pop it in a box, shove it on a shelf, done.
When I was watching this with Eleanor, she made a really interesting point, which is that they give their stuff back, but none of them are punished for stealing it.
Is that the most Torchwood moment?
I think that's the most Torchwood moment. And also, there's no distinction is made between Tosh, who stole a rubbish scanner, and Owen, who stole this alien chemical that makes you irresistible.
Because do we have has Jack checked the city's CCTV to see what they've got? And has he seen the horrible things that Owen did? Or is it just an amnesty where he's like, hey guys, if anyone's got anything, I'm not going to yell at you. Please just give it back. And they're like, oh yeah, all right.
This is a safe space for you to just leave it on the desk. I won't look. It's one of those things where I'm like, I'd love to fill in those gaps a little bit. I could I want to know how Jack works as a boss. Is there what does it mean that Susie was second in command? Does that just mean she's the one to lead the charge into alien battle when Jack isn't
I don't
there?
know. It's just who's going to give the orders when I'm not in the room. It means literally nothing.
Yeah, the hierarchy of personnel in this job.
And where's HR?
Yeah.
Because HR needs to be informed of quite a lot of the things that have gone on already in this episode.
And this might be quite a TV thing, where TV writers write a workplace drama, which this is in a way, even though it's a weird workplace. Mm-hmm. But they've not actually ever worked in a normal workplace. They've only worked in television. Because I was watching this, I had an office job when I was watching this first time. So I was like, how does annual leave work in this job? How does overtime work?
Well, then there's a honeymoon later. Yeah. And that makes sense. And maybe that's because Torchwood is so much like a normal working show that they've screwed themselves over, because by giving us these really real examples of everyone coming into work every day and everyone sitting at their desks and having their lunch breaks in the break room, you see that and it makes you question the most mundane things you could question about this alien organization. Like, when does Jack send the rota out? How far in advance is it done? Yeah. Do they have an app? Ridiculous.
And I think there's a lot of that in Russell T Davis's work.
Yeah.
He's interested in some of those things, but not others.
Mm-hmm. I guess he's interested in how ordinary human beings fit this job into their lives, but he's not interested in how this organization fits into the world.
Yeah.
Like, you see them working together as colleagues, and they feel like colleagues, and they feel like they have work friendships around all this madness. And it completely nails normal working people with aliens. Yes.
So here's something we haven't talked about, is that they have a pet pterodactyl.
Right, sorry. Yeah, so the bit at the end is, so we have the roof scenes where they're on roofs for reasons that don't make any sense. Like, WMC is not a view. It's just a big lump of
It's not
bronze.
even very tall.
It's not tall at all. The main thing that is in your field of vision is the rest of the roof. So I don't know what they're doing. It's not even on the waterfront. Okay, sure. So after we have that unnecessary shot, we have a wide shot of the pterodactyl flying around outside. How can that possibly be acceptable? What?
Yeah.
What are you doing? Like, we've seen in later episodes, we have a flashback to when they had to catch this pterodactyl. Clearly need it to be caught because it's a danger to the public. And yet we just leave it. What are you doing? This is so irresponsible.
Yeah. It really speaks to this show that in most TV shows, you see a pterodactyl outside and you go, uh-oh, the pterodactyl's gone out. But in this show, we go, oh, what have you done now?
Yeah. They're like, okay, we're a secret government organisation. Outside the government, beyond the police. Let's keep ourselves on the DL, okay? We don't want anyone to know where our super secret hub is. So they plaster the word Torchwood all over their Jeep. And they fly their prehistoric pet right in a little ring around Roald Dahl Place, right above the secret government base. Just like, I give up. Is that the most Torchwood moment?
Maybe that's the most... Because I think you're right, that is pure Torchwood. Because most TV shows that are like this, they're almost obsessed with explaining everything. Whereas in Torchwood, every 5 minutes, something absolutely ridiculous happens that there is no explanation for within the logic of the show.
Yep. It's just so dumb. And then we get the kind of preview for what's coming up, which is... Yeah. Full of surprises, isn't it?
Okay, so shall we pick our Torchwood moment of the week?
Yeah, so what would you say is the most Torchwood moment of this episode?
I think I agree with you from earlier. I think it's the moment where they all give their object back and there's no punishment. They face no repercussions.
Yeah, that's very good. Cool. So... thank you very much, Steph, for sharing your thoughts on the greatest TV show ever made. Up next is what's the episode name of episode 2? I don't know.
It's one of 2 episodes of Torchwood that is called Day 1.
Oh, Day 1. That's it. Yeah, because it's Gwen's first day on the job.
Yeah.
And I guess they were just ready to make sure that everyone knew it was an adult show. So
yeah.
It's so stupid. I hate this show.